Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. For the past 14 months, you have heard two main things about the war in Ukraine. The first is that the war in Ukraine is a war of national sovereignty. It is not a proxy battle between superpowers. Russia invaded Ukraine. That was immoral. The United States supports Ukraine because the United States supports democracy. But the United States itself is not at war with Russia. This is Ukraine's war to fight. The second thing we have heard over and over again is that Ukraine is winning that war. Ukrainian troops are brave and noble. Russian troops are evil and incompetent. The Ukrainians are beating the Russians. In the end, their victory is inevitable. Now, you're very familiar with these points because you have heard them every day since last February. You've heard them repeated by every power center in the United States, the Pentagon, the White House, the leaders of both parties in Congress, CEOs, and celebrities. And most insistently of all, you've heard them from virtually every single outlet along the entire spectrum of our national news media. These are the two essential themes of the war in Ukraine, and both of them are lies. We know that they're lies because late last week, leaked intelligence about the war in Ukraine began to appear on social media. Briefing slides prepared by the U.S. government began to show up, among other places, on Twitter. And the slides show that this is in fact not Ukraine's war. It's our war. The United States is a direct combatant in a war against Russia. As we speak, American soldiers are fighting Russian soldiers. So this is not a regional conflict in Eastern Europe. This is a hot war between the two primary nuclear superpowers on Earth. And yet this war has never been formally declared. It has not been authorized by Congress. And for that reason, this war is a violation of American law. It is a crime. The second thing we learned from these slides is that despite direct U.S. involvement, Ukraine is in fact losing the war. 7 Ukrainians are being killed for every Russian. Ukrainian air defenses have been utterly degraded. Ukraine is losing. The Biden administration is perfectly aware of this. They're panicked about it, but they have lied about this fact to the public. Just 2 weeks ago, for example, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin told the U.S. Senate that Russian military power is, quote, waning. In other words, Russia is losing the war. That was a lie. He knew it was when he said it, but he repeated it in congressional testimony. That is a crime. But Lloyd Austin has not been arrested for committing that crime. Instead, the only man who has been taken into custody, or likely ever will be, is a 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guardsman who leaked the slides that showed that Lloyd Austin was lying. He revealed the crimes, therefore he's the criminal. That's how Washington works. Telling the truth is the only real sin. Now, our news media exist and have constitutional protection precisely in order to push back against this grotesque standard. Their only job is to tell the truth. And yet tonight, the news media are celebrating the capture of the kid who told Americans what's actually happening in Ukraine. They are treating him like Osama bin Laden, maybe a little worse, actually, because unlike al-Qaeda, apparently this kid is a racist. Here's CNN.
The Washington Post, as you know, reviewed video of this suspect yelling racial and anti-Semitic slurs.
Is this a dangerous person? This air guardsman who's now been taken into custody had talked about being a gun enthusiast, had been at gun ranges. He's obviously a member of the military.
And he's the big guy in the scene. Somehow he has access to this kind of information, and that makes him even larger.
A person who thinks they know better than everyone else, they're smarter than everyone else in their view.
And that this is a 21-year-old man. He's described as a gun enthusiast. Feels like, in some of these descriptions, somebody who's maybe hungry for power.
So this 21-year-old Air National Guardsman from Massachusetts is not a whistleblower, CNN explains, with the help of the many intelligence agency figures it has now hired as analysts. No, he's not a whistleblower. He's a criminal. Because he is, unlike the people who run our government, quote, hungry for power. And because this 21-year-old was so hungry for power, federal law enforcement had to swing into action with unfamiliar speed and efficiency and apprehend him. He was that threatening. Now, keep in mind, as of tonight, we still don't know where Jeffrey Epstein got hundreds of millions of dollars. We have no idea. Nor do we know what he did for a living. We don't know who left pipe bombs on Capitol Hill on January 6th, 2 of them. We don't know who leaked the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. We can't even say for certain who killed the President of the United States, because after 60 years, the Biden administration is still hiding thousands of pages of classified documents from the Kennedy assassination, just as they are hiding more than 1 billion other classified documents. But tonight, we can say for dead certain who embarrassed Toria Nuland and Joe Biden, and that kid is going to jail for a long, long time. That's the standard. The media are fine with that standard. Watch this remarkable exchange on Monday of this week between the White House press corps and Biden flack John Kirby.
Without confirming the validity of the documents, this is information that has no business in the public domain. It has no business, if you don't mind me saying, on the pages of front pages of newspapers or on television. It is not intended for public consumption, and it should not be out there.
So the fact that U.S. soldiers are fighting Russian soldiers in a war in Ukraine has no business in the public domain. The fact that the country we are backing and fighting alongside is losing, not winning, has no business in the public domain. You have no right to know what your government is doing in your name with your tax dollars and with the future of your children and grandchildren. You have no right to know. Shut up and stop asking relevant questions. Okay, said the media. And if you want to get really sick to your stomach, go pull a transcript from the Pentagon briefing today, where news reporters asked Flax from the Pentagon, what are we going to do to keep information like this secret in the future? Not one question about the substance of the information. We're fighting a war against Russia directly? Really? Don't they have the largest nuclear arsenal in the world? Not one question. How can we help you keep it secret? Those were the questions. And not only are the media covering up the substance of the story, which is not who leaked it, but what he leaked, they're covering up the crimes committed to get you this information. The administration apparently used illegal surveillance techniques to identify this kid, apparently with the help of the Washington Post and the New York Times, who are its accomplices. They're not holding government accountable. They're helping government keep you from knowing what government is doing. Today, the Washington Post reported it had exclusively obtained some of the classified documents this leaker possessed. Quote, the Post also reviewed approximately 300 photos of classified documents, most of which have not been made public. Some of the text documents the leaker is said to have written out. So we've got two problems here. If it's illegal to see these documents, if you don't have a security clearance, how is the Washington Post doing this legally? They don't have a security clearance. Well, obviously they were given them by the U.S. intel agencies and are working alongside them. But the bigger problem is this is information that's relevant to the public in a so-called democracy. You can't lie about things that jeopardize our collective future and get away with it. And you certainly shouldn't be doing that with the assistance of the news media. The news media whose job it is to inform you of what your government is doing. But instead they are working actively late into the night to lie to you on behalf of their masters in permanent Washington. And by the way, just last week, the plan was to lie in an even more grotesque way and blame Russia for this. And we're quoting, Russia or pro-Russian elements are likely behind the leak of several classified U.S. military documents posted on social media that offer a partial month-old snapshot of the war in Ukraine, 3 U.S. officials told Reuters on Friday. Really? Who are these officials who lied to Reuters? And then Reuters just, of course, obediently reprinted their lies, as they always do. News agencies print what they are told to print by the intel agencies, no matter how ridiculous it is, no matter how much dignity and self-respect they exchange in return for doing it. So what's happening to this leaker now is what happens to anyone who contradicts the national security state and their obedient servants in the media. You go to prison so the media can continue to tell you lies. Here's MSNBC, for example, assuring its viewers that everything's just fine.
What the Russians didn't understand was that they were going into the lion's den. That kind of what we would say in the military, this force multiplied, made the Ukrainian army quite literally unbeatable. They are winning. Russia is going to lose this war.
Every last person has said exactly what Malcolm just said. They're going to win this war. It's not a matter of if, but when.
14 months in, they are simultaneously telling you that Ukraine's victory is inevitable, mostly because of the moral power they possess. But at the same time, you need to send tens or hundreds of billions of dollars more in advanced weapon systems to Ukraine to keep them from losing. What will they say now that we know the truth and that we know that they lied to us, not just the U.S. government, but the U.S. news media? Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly opens, stories that are changing the world and changing your life. From Tucker Carlson Tonight.